So let's take a look at where we left off. If I go ahead and play this, you can see we've got some building pieces breaking down, things like that. What I want to do is kind of give you sort of an idea on how particle systems work. So what I'm going to do is just go to File and New Scene, and then later we'll return back to this building fracture stuff. So I'll do a new scene general. I won't save this because I already have it saved, but if you don't, go ahead and do that. Now inside of our new scene, go ahead and delete this cube. And then I'm just going to add a plane. So Shift A, or you can go up to Add if that hotkey doesn't work for you. And go to Add, and then Mesh, and then add a plane. I'm going to hit G like George, and then I'm going to hit Z like Zebra and just kind of move this up. And then I'm going to hit S like Sam, scale that up. And then here you can see my scale is a little bit off, and so is my location. So I'm going to hit Control A, and I'm just going to freeze the location, and then Control A again, and I'm going to freeze the scale. And what I'd like to do is kind of give you an introduction. So if you want to create a particle system, it's this little dot with the 3 little dots coming out of it. And once you click on that, you'll notice there's nothing there. But if you hit this plus sign, you'll have a particle system. Now in our timeline here, if I hit spacebar to play, you can see that we have all these particles showing up. Now if I go into my camera here, and I'm going to lock it and zoom out, if I hit F12 on my keyboard to render this, you'll see nothing but the plane. And the reason for that is because these are just placeholders in the scene. You actually have to tell it how you want particles to display. All right, I'm going to hold Shift and press the left arrow on my keyboard to go back to 1. Now inside of here, you can see we have a number of particles. So if I make this like 100 for now, which is completely okay because this is just representative in our scene. And also if you have a slower computer, it might be a good idea for you to do. So if I press play here, you can see that it's playing a lot less particles. I'm going to hold Shift and go back with my left arrow. If I make this like 20,000 particles and I press play, I don't know if that was 2,000 or 20, you can see we get a lot more particles. So just kind of making you aware. I'm going to go with 1,000. I have a pretty powerful computer, and I don't think 1,000 is really going to do anything to slow me down. Just a couple other things to note is we have our number here. We have our seed, which is the randomness. So the higher this number is, the more random your particles are going to be. There's an end frame and a start frame. So let's say I don't want it to start until frame 25, right? So I'll just do frame 20, and then I hit spacebar. You'll notice there's no particles, but then when 20 happens, that's when the particles come. So I'm going to move that back to 1 just because, I want it to be on 1. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to hit space to play. Notice that my particles fall, but they die about here. The reason for that is that's due to this lifetime here. So if I make the lifetime 20, and let's go back, and I'm going to hit spacebar again, notice that they die much further, much higher up than here. So this is a way to adjust how long you want them to live in the scene. It's important to note that this lifetime 50 here isn't some arbitrary number. It's actually frame 50. So notice that they're dying off once they play all the way out to frame 50. And notice there's an end frame of 200. If I go past frame 200, the particles also die off. So really our entire simulation is going from 0 to 200, but the particles themselves only go towards 50 frames. Regardless if I'm here, they die off. So the next thing is if we go to source here, actually, let me just kind of unlock this and go back into my view. My object itself, I'm going to hit tab on my keyboard, go to edit mode. You can see that it has these little dots on the corner. The way a polygon face consists of is 2 triangles. So there's actually a triangle here and a triangle there. And on every corner of one of those triangles, you have a little dot, and that's called a vertice. So if I change this face to vertice and I hit play, you'll notice that all of the particles, let me make sure that I'm in object mode. So I'm going to hit tab and go to object mode. You can also click up here to switch your modes if those aren't working for you. Now when I hit spacebar, notice that all of those particles are coming out of the vertice. Generally, I want it to come out of the face, right? Because say I'm making snow or something like that, I want to see my surface area that I would have over a house or a scene or whatever. All right, another thing is if you click on volume, this creates a area essentially that if we go back to our first frame here and I press play, it creates sort of like an area that's based on volume. And what that's doing is that's just the middle surface area of this object. So let me kind of show you this. I'm going to hit tab, I'm going to go to edit mode, and I'm going to select a face. So I'm going to click on this, or I'll press the number 3 on my keyboard. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And I select this face and I hit E, and that's extrude. And then I can hit Z, and that'll lock in the extrusion. And now what'll happen is, actually, I don't know if that's, let's hit Alt Z to look inside of this, if it's extruding from which face. So let's hit Tab and go to object mode. Yeah, so now you can see it's extruding, but it's bouncing inside of the surface. Actually, let me extrude down. Let me see if that's it. So E and then Z, I'm gonna go down. And then Tab and go to object mode. And now when I space this out, yeah, see how they're kind of trapped inside of that volume? And that's because I have volume here. Otherwise, if I go to face, you can see it's just kind of emitting from that face. So volume kind of gives it a restricted area or a restricted box that these are in. Now they're kind of pouring out because I don't have enough geometry or areas to encapsulate this. Let's see, I'm gonna go back a little bit to plane mode and make sure I'm in object mode here, hit spacebar. Another thing you can do to improve the quality is if you, let's see, we open, let's see, we have these different, I mean, we have random, we have grid. Grid is kind of cool because what it does is it actually emits them in a sort of grid pattern. See that? The particles in a grid pattern, and they kind of fall down. So I think that's kind of neat. I mean, I don't know, like jittered is kind of like a little bit, they kind of bounce all over the place. Random is probably guess that it's like they come out randomly at different points. All right, so let's go to, I'm going to move this down because I normally cache at the end of the life cycle. Let's go to velocity here. Velocity is essentially the normal, the speed. So what is a normal? Well, if we click on this and let's see, and we turn on face orientation, you can see the top is blue. And that means that that this is the area where the objects are actually extruding from. That's why we see them bounce up. And then this is the bottom of the face. So if I hit R to rotate and I hit Y, and oops, looks like let's see, why is my pivot point there? Let's see, Control A, and then these are two. Sorry, I guess they don't have a hotkey for this, but just do set origin to geometry to set the origin point to the geometry. Then hit R and then Y, and then let's rotate this downward. And now when I hit spacebar, notice that they're actually emitting from that blue face facing downward. So just so you know, that's where the face normal is at. Now, if you want to, and you want it to go out of the back instead of the front, you just can make it -1, and then you can see now they're coming out of the back of the object. I'm going to turn this back to 1 here. All right, so let's also talk about, let's see, velocity, right? So I'm going to actually just delete this. I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to make a cube. And I'm going to apply a particle system to this cube. And if I run this, you can see it runs down. Now, if we go to our velocity section, you can see there's object align. Let's say I make this like 10. And I go back and I hit space. You can see now the particles are all shooting at a velocity that's 10 on the x-axis. So it's just kind of the way it works. Now a tangent is essentially, it says lets the surface tangent give the particles a starting velocity. So if I take this and I make this 10 and I make this 0 and I hit spacebar, you can see it's kind of shooting at 10 in every direction. So it's sort of like falling off, and it's giving that. If I make this velocity 10 and I make this 10 on the x-axis and I hit spacebar, you can see we're getting this kind of random speed, but it's coming off at 10 there. So I'm going to make this back to 0. And I mean, if I leave my normal at 0, what you'll see is I hit spacebar, oops, let me take this off. It kind of falls in every direction. See that? It's just kind of falling or dripping off the surface, kind of like something that would be soaked in water. If you make the normals 1, it'll shoot out a little bit more. See, off of each surface, because this has a face normal on all 4 sides. All right, so let's animate this. So I'm going to turn on auto key, and I'm just going to position this guy over here. And then I'm going to go to maybe frame 20, and I'll move this guy over here. So let's hit spacebar. And you could see as the object stops on 20, they just continue to fall. That's not the way it works in real life. In real life, it's moving at such a rate that once it stops, there should be some overlap with those little particles, right? So like say you're creating a simulation of like water or a drink or something. That's where object velocity comes into play. Let's say I add 1 there. I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit spacebar. Now you could see as it stops, it like makes it whip across, right? Which is kind of cool. If you increase the object velocity, you can really launch those little particles as it's moving. You see that? But that's not as natural. So maybe 0.5 or 1 is kind of what we're looking at. So something like that. So let's work our way down. So let's select our cube again. Let's do physics next. Now this has a weight here. So if I make this 5 and I go back and I hit spacebar, you can see they're a ton heavier. Like that particle looks like it's more like honey than water, right? Like if it's something that's dripping off. Brownian adds a little bit of randomness to the particles as they fall down. So if I hit spacebar, you can see it's adding randomness instead of like going straight down. So it adds a little bit jackiness or noise to the movement of our particle. All right, so let's take Brownian mid to that 0. Now damp or drag, if we take drag and let's say make that 5, right? And I hit spacebar on this to show it. Notice that the particles, they still move down, but they drag a little bit. But if you really want them to move super slow, you want to add damp to your, see how they kind of like fall? It's like damp in that environment. And so once we hit 50, their lifetime died off. But that's how you can really, so if we make this like 0.1, and we hit spacebar, you can see they're really damp. Like it could be like a thick, honey or something like that. We're already at 12 minutes on this one, just giving you time in case you have something else. I'm going to end this video here. When we come back, we'll just keep going through there. We're looking at deflection, how to render, all that good stuff.